Okay, so here we are again. We're about to do an exercise together. I'm about to explain to you an exercise that you're then going to do at home. But before we're going to do that, I want to draw the connections between visual thinking and the Socratic philosophy and the Socratic spirit. Because Socrates' legacy lives not in what he wrote, but in what he taught, in how he spoke, in how he listened to his students, and above all, in how he asked questions. So we kind of know that the key point of Socrates' philosophy is learning how to ask good questions. And by doing so, he transformed a dialogue and a conversation into a living tool of discovering the truth. His method, which was called the maietics, as you remember, was based on a very simple yet powerful gesture, asking the question what is something, and patiently waiting for knowledge to emerge as part of the dialogue. You can see here that Socrates' conception of knowledge is very peculiar, because knowledge is not like a coin that can be exchanged hand by hand, or it cannot be exchanged mind for mind. But actually, knowledge is is a co-creation. It's something that is co-created through the shared intellectual labor of people, or intellectual work of different people. Socrates stands in stark opposition to the dominant understanding of what knowledge and education is today, because most of the time today, at least, we think that learning something, teaching something, is just to memorize certain facts and information and to record them in our mind. Socrates teaches us that knowledge is actually something dynamic. It's not a static process, but it's a very dynamical process that implies embarking on a path, on an ongoing and never-ending path of clarifying, asking questions and clarifying what we know. Very interesting, Socrates' spirit and understanding of philosophy finds an unexpected ally in the much more modern practice of visual thinking. At a first glance, visual thinking and philosophy might seem two separate worlds, two worlds that don't have anything to do with one another, but we know that that's not the case. And indeed, if we look closely, we can see how the two share the same goal, which is not to provide definitive answers or final solutions, but actually to open up the space for exploration, for inquiry, and for discovery. In other words, the point of both philosophy and critical thinking is to create space for a divergent type of thinking. In particular, in visual thinking, images do functions in the same way as questions function in Socrates. So we see here that images, which are sketches, drawings, maps, diagrams, and so on and so forth, should not or are not meant to deliver a final solution, a final explanation, but they should spark a curiosity. And that's the point. They should spark a curiosity. They should allow us to make a new connection. They should allow us to reflect critically about a certain topic or argument. To better understand this parallel, consider how we usually approach images. In a textbook, for instance, when we look at a diagram, what we often think is, oh, that diagram is a simplification of the information that are written in the text. That is, it's a neat and a tidy summary. That's not the case. For visual thinking, that's not the case, because actually images and diagram are not simply a summary of a multitude of informations. A diagram, it's actually a web of connections. A diagram is a web of connections that asks me to reflect critically on what I am reading and what I am studying. It asks us to explore different relationships, to create new connections, and to come up with different interpretations. An ambiguous illustration can work the same way and can actually be even more powerful in this sense, more powerful than a diagram. Because when you look at a very ambiguous image or picture, you start to ask yourself questions like, what's happening here? I don't understand. What is missing here? What are the interpretations that I can give to this painting or to this image? So you see here that images, they spark our curiosity, they elicit, they stimulate a process of asking questions and a process of developing our divergent type of thinking without always relying to ready-made answers. Now, I would like to consider, before we start the exercise, so that you have all of the information, I would like to consider some of the applications of this idea for which images function like questions. And one of the first practice or the first application of this that I want to talk to you about is the practice of visual dialogue. What is a visual dialogue? So basically, imagine a teacher or a facilitator that shows a group of people an image. It can be whatever. It can be a very complex and challenging work of art. It can be an ambiguous image. It can be a photo full of details, whatever the teacher decides to show. Sorry, one second. Instead of asking the participants to describe and analyze what they see, the teacher asks them to make questions, invites them to ask questions. So, for instance, a question like, what's happening here? What's going on in this painting? Why is this painting so full of elements, so full of details? And what are these details? What connects? What is the connection between all of these elements? Is there something missing? Why did the photographer decided to portray this particular scene and not other scenes? You see that people come up with all sort of questions, and these questions are very personal, and they actually allow the group to confront different perspectives. So all of the questions that are being made by looking at the painting are being collected by the teacher at the end of the exercises, and everyone shares the questions that they come up with. And you can see here, as I said, that there is a collective work that is being made, because each person comes from a different perspective and asks questions from a different perspective. So at the end, the drawing does not, or the picture, the photograph, or whatever is chosen, emerges not as a solution to a problem, but it emerges as a set of visualized questions. It emerges as a collective map of curiosity that is the result of a shared intellectual work. Okay, that's the first practice that I wanted to talk about. The second one is the practice of a notebook of visual questions. In this case, the teacher asks students to come up with a question of philosophical weight, such as what is time, what is justice, what is courage, what distinguishes a just behavior from an unjust behavior, what is self-identity, or what is the soul, what is the body. There are many philosophical questions. So which we can choose from a wide range of questions. But the point is that students should represent graphically the questions that they pick. They should not use words alone, but they should represent the question graphically, and should, of course, not draw sketches, draw images, sorry, I'm a little bit tired. They should draw sketches. They should draw diagrams, a symbol, whatever comes to their mind. The point here is that the notebook becomes not a recording of information and facts, not as an ensemble of words, but it becomes an open-ended platform. It becomes a living archive of a thought in progress. And you can see here that even the point is not to answer the question, the point is to grapple with the question, to understand the question differently. And it's a brilliant work of, again, stimulating a divergent type of thinking, where images function as a question that solicits us to think differently. These practices, of course, can work really, really well in the classroom, but they can also be applied in businesses, that is, in corporations. And too often, indeed, organizations of different kinds and brands of different kinds fall into the trap, we can say, of giving quick answers, of caring only about answers. And so they basically just rush to find solutions. So they just rush to find quick solutions instead of really grappling or really understanding the problem that they're trying to resolve. Combining the Socratic method with visual thinking, by combining the Socratic method with visual thinking, we can challenge this trap. We can change this attitude. We can challenge this attitude. And so the team leader can divide the workers into different teams, and can ask these different teams to map complex problems by using, again, symbols, diagrams, storyboards, and other tools, other graphic tools that comes to their mind. And these teams, they have to look at the problem from different perspectives. You see here that this exercise allows to prevent premature closures. So that is, it prevents to give answers that are too quick, too immediate, and too unreflexive to a certain problem, while at the same time creating space for a divergent type of thinking. So, after this quite long explanations, I hope it was helpful. However, we are ready to start our exercise. Well, so we are ready to start our second exercise, which is called the Tree of Questions, the exercise related to this class on Socrates and visual thinking. Before we start, I want to tell you that, as you can see, I have already drawn the tree with the branches and all of the leaves. Leaves here, but I want to tell you that as of last time, the exercise is going to be around 20 minutes, and as of last time, you should find a quiet, comfortable, and silent place where you can take some time to yourself to reflect and to complete the exercise. Again, sorry for repeating myself. As of last time, you also need some markers or pencils, whatever you have, in order to draw the tree. And you also need a piece of paper or just like a page of a notebook in order to draw the tree. That's all. What do you have to do in this exercise? As you can see, the first thing that you have to do is to pick a topic. Pick a topic that sparks your interest. As you can see, I have picked the topic of happiness because we have talked about happiness while describing the philosophy of Socrates, and because it's a very simple, common, but also enticing topic. Interesting topic. Then you should start asking yourself some questions, some very basic and fundamental questions. As you can see here, I've picked why, how, and what. You can also add the where and when, and depends what question you like the most. I have only picked 3 questions, but you can also have more than 3 core questions. Then, for each question that I have picked, I have added a new question which started with the formula what if. You see what if here, and what if here, because it allows us to add a different perspective on the question itself. But let me read the questions that I have picked. So you see here 3 branches. I drew 3 branches, and on the branches, you can see the first question is, what is happiness? This is clearly a Socratic question, very basic, but also very important to understand what is a something. And connected to this is the question, what if there isn't only happiness, but also joy, tranquility? This means that most of the time we think that happiness is the most important aspect of our life. We all want to attain happiness in our life. But what if joy, tranquility, serenity, or calmness are aspects of happiness, or different aspect from happiness that can be even more important than happiness itself? So that's the first one. Second one, how can we be happy? That's a very basic and probably also a very usual question. And this is connected to the other question, what if happiness is not something individualistic, but something that can be shared? So you can see here that most of the time we think, how can I be happy? What can I do to be happy? And I only think about myself, my happiness. But what if I have to shift my perspective? What if I can shift my point of view, and instead of thinking, how can I be happy, I think of how can we be happy? So instead of just thinking about myself, I think about the community that I'm part of, or the friends that are part of, from which that I hang up with, and so on and so forth. Okay. Last but not least, why do we want to be happy? That's another very Socratic question and philosophical question. Why do we want something? And it's also for me a very strong question, because most of the time we think happiness is the most important thing, as I have already told you. And so to ask ourselves, but why do we want to be happy? Why do we care so much about happiness? Is a very important starting point, at least for me. And this question is connected with the other question, what if happiness is not the goal, but the process itself? So most of the time we think about happiness as a state, as a goal that needs to be reached. But maybe happiness is not the goal, it's the process itself, is what we're doing to reach happiness. And so the process itself, the path that we're making, that's what happiness is, instead of the goal, instead of the state in which we feel happy. So this is the exercise. I hope you can do it at home. I hope you find the space to reflect and make up all of these beautiful questions. And I hope you like it. So I'll say bye to you and thank you for your attention.